Dr. Paul Leon Masters in the University of Metaphysics. When I lived in Las Vegas, one of my favorite people was Dr. Paul Leon Masters, the founder of the University of Metaphysics. My kids and I used to head out to his place on Sundays. At that time, his University Church Institute is what he called it. The University Church Institute. Perhaps inspired by a Mormon name, I don't know. But it was in a freestanding building on the south side of Desert Inn Road in Las Vegas. And the address of that old place was 925 East Desert Inn Road, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89109. But the weird thing is, even having an address and everything, now if you go there, there's no hint of it. There's just an empty parking lot. And looking at that empty lot, you would never have known. Nobody would ever have known that it was once a place of dreams. So what was it like attending Dr. Paul Leon Masters' church in Las Vegas? Back in the day, my kids and I would jump on the Maryland Parkway bus near UNLV. We lived right there next to it. And we'd head north to the Boulevard Mall, and then we'd jump off, and then we'd start heading west on Desert Inn Road. We'd walk west past the little package store right on the corner, past the olive trees, past robins, past dive-bombing mockingbirds. And so we'd walk for like 10 minutes, and then after we arrived, we'd head right to the refreshments. There was a circle of chairs out back on the south side of the building under a covered parking lot area that adjoined the back door of the building. And that was the door through which most people entered. It was a lot of fun to sit out back under the overhang, drink punch, eat donuts and cookies, and just watch the different varieties of people that would show up and listen to people talk. Some people, they'd show up wearing all their wild, mystical macrame type clothes with sparkles on it or beads or whatever. Maybe they were trying to be gypsies or something like that. But it doesn't matter who they were. Dr. Paul Leon Masters was a great guy, and he welcomed everybody there. And when Dr. Paul Leon Masters and Dr. Sandra Masters pulled up in their light-colored Cadillac type of luxury car, it was a sight to see. They really looked like a dream couple, like a match made in heaven, and they had it together. They'd park their car close to the building in the parking place just east of where the refreshments were. And there they were, outstepped Hyonkers, that's what we called them. We called him Hyonkers because he had a really distinctive laugh. It was something like this. Sorry about that. But I consider him to be an elk of a man. If you've ever seen an elk, you look at its neck, it's all muscular, and it's just magnificent. And that's the way Paul Leon Masters looked back then. He looked majestic, and his beautiful younger-looking wife, Dr. Sandra, they looked great. And Dr. Paul Leon Masters, back then, his suits fit really well. And his blonde-haired wife, Sandra, was magnetic, beautiful, spiritual, and just an absolute knockout. So they would come into on the south side of the building, right where the doors were, and they'd stand in the doorway, and they shook each of our hands warmly and greeted us as we entered from the south side of the building, past those refreshments into the meeting area. And if there was ever a crossroads of people with good vibes, Dr. Masters' Sunday meeting had it all. I mean, yogis, Christians, Taoists, Buddhists, mystics, and everyone all converged on the University Church Institute. Some folks that showed up would sometimes wish they hadn't, though. Because Dr. Paul Leon Masters, I'll tell you in a minute. Just look forward to this, okay? The story I'm going to tell you. But he was a majestic person. Those that saw Dr. Masters in his later years have no idea how majestic he was back then. Sure, if anything, they say people get more radiant with each year, especially if they're into spirituality and they read their scriptures and pray and everything. But he was once a literal Adonis of metaphysics, and I kid you not. What I mean is those oversized suits that he struggled to fill out later in life. You've seen him with just really big, with a wide collar that didn't fit and everything. They were the very same suits that he wore when he shone like an athlete on stage. And he wasn't even young back then, but he was still in great shape, man. I guess he used to really be into baseball and like that. So on my website, I placed the photo, which I obtained that photo from the University of Metaphysics, because I actually got my Bachelor's of Metaphysics degree through their university and requested it, and they sent it to me. That photo comes closest to showing how Dr. Paul Leon Masters looked in the early to mid-90s. So my kids and I, we'd get all covered in cookies and donuts and stuff. We'd just be woofing it down. And we usually sat in the audience on the right-hand side, about halfway back, because we wanted to be close enough that we could see what was going on, but we didn't want too many people staring at the back of our heads when we were sitting there. So up on the stage were two white chairs, one for Dr. Paul Leon Masters and one for Dr. Sandra Masters. And it was for sure reminiscent of kind of a Jim and Tammy Baker type of thing, but not in a dumb way. It was in a great way. And even when she was no longer there, Dr. Masters kept both the chairs up there. There were two triangular mirrored candles with a candle in the middle, one on each side. And in the center was a white podium that had a looped design, the circle with the cross underneath it, if I'm remembering right. These and there were deep blue velvety blackout curtains along the back wall, which coincidentally later in life I realized that they also matched the set that this guy named Arnold Murray, this Christian maverick guy that he just said whatever he felt like about Christianity, and he got so popular. But if you ever look at his curtains and you compare him to Dr. Masters, you'll see that they're the same set, the same design basically. And up front would be Nancy Abercrombie. She would be up front singing with her beautiful voice. And when you look across the room, it was like a sea of good people and God-loving souls, peppered by the occasional specimen of every variety of space person, hippie, alien, and mystic that could crawl out from under any rock. They all descended on the one place, and we were all sitting there looking around the room to see who was spiritual. Who was who by the way we looked, right? And at the time, I figured the more zoned out someone looked, the more enlightened they were. And that's because I read a statement once from a famous yogi that said that someone with God realization and someone that's totally insane will sometimes look about the same from the outside. So when I looked in the mirror, I both liked what I saw and didn't like what I saw. Yeah, some people that were going for the mysterious look, being all dressed in black like Johnny Cash, and some metaphysical type of deal they had going on. And I didn't want to look too clueless sitting there, right? So I tried to look kind of half nuts. as if I was gazing beyond the veil, into the great beyond. I'm sure Dr. Paul Leon Masters was looking out into the audience. Oh, it looks like a good crowd. Seeing me and just cracking up, trying not to pee his pants with laughter. But to Dr. Masters' credit, he attracted mostly a good crowd, a lot of positive thinking, good-hearted, loving people. So I sat there trying to look all spaced out. And then in my article I write, "Ha ha, what an idiot." There's a full range of brands and ideas in this world, and some of them are pretty dumb to follow. The thing is, though, and a diploma, it can make crazy ideas seem legitimate. It can lend credence to something imagined or made up by the misguided, the fakers, the con artists, or the insane. And so right now I want to give a little disclaimer. This article is not referring to your favorite, whoever they are, spiritual, weirdo, whatever they are. It's not referring to and not directed at any particular persons, groups, companies, or interests. And any similarity between you, your favorite one, your group, company, or interest, to any person's group, company, or interest mentioned in this article is coincidental and not intended. In other words, if you think you got the real deal, I don't even know who you got, so don't be saying I'm criticizing them. Your person, I mean, in theory, there could always be the real one, and maybe you got them. So just realize I'm not talking about your person or whatever you fell in love with in the world of weirdness. I wanted to say there's a whole world of tricks and cons that have already been explained and debunked by others on video and in articles, so I'm not going to get into that here. Even so, though, a legitimate diploma with a good background and real information can help set you straight. So Dr. Paul Leon Masters, he really did try to help people. He had several great on-track courses that he offered by mail back then. He had the little packets that he'd mail out to people, to those that would like to learn the wisdom of the ages and receive a degree or certification that they can then use professionally to help people. And back then, there was this concept of what color is your parachute, like if your one career goes away, what are you going to do? And since I was into helping people, I thought, man, I might as well just get that degree as kind of a backup thing. And so I did, and it was pretty great. I don't mind having gotten it. But I will say, Dr. Masters, his brand's a bit different than mine. So, I mean, I respect his brand, but the thing is, with the diploma, you're still free to believe and teach and do as you want. I mean, most of Dr. Masters' students, in my experience, were pretty great. And what Dr. Masters did is he tried to help redirect those that were confused away from the many misconceptions and just the crazy ideas floating around out there in the New Age and metaphysical world. A lot of those ideas were just collections of BS made up through the years. Somebody wrote down their imaginings in a book, especially in the early books. And then people, maybe it happened this way. Maybe they figured that since it's in a book, it must be true. So they'd send away for the book and memorize and parrot out just the silly nonsense from the book. I mean, some of it's real stuff. So I mean, if you have a book you love, just realize I'm not talking about your book either. Anyway, so anyhow, and those books were there, and it became the reference for just another of the 10,000 topics of nonsense complete and utter nonsense that you see in the New Age metaphysical circles. Yes, it isn't a book, but the first person could have been wrong. They could have been messing with you, or they could have just made it up. 10,000 trails of nonsense, all leading outward, away from the one that is real. But that's what they all have in common. Location, location, location. They all come from middle management, someplace outside of you. And too many people are seduced by all those sparkly external things, the phenomenon, right? Just a whole variety of sidetracking, let me do it this way, attention stealing, attention stealing substitutes. That when it boils down to it, they're just nothing more than spiritual middle management. Somebody thought up some idea and they're just going to tell you about it, and you're supposed to run off and just believe the flippin' thing. But every one of those suckers that a person could go to for spiritual advice has their own set of filters that they see the world through. And if your spiritual advisor was a screw-up, their misguided ways could color or influence any information that you could possibly get from them. So you show up, you figure, I feel like attending a sideshow. I'm just going to go into this person's spiritual advisement place. And they're still hungover from the night before. No problem. Let's just rush right out and get advice from them. And then I wrote here, genius. Like it's really genius that even if they're hungover and just completely messed up, if their life is a literal sewer, a garbage can of stupid and foolish ideas, just because they claim to do what they do, people go over there and they can't wait to get information from them. And in fairness now, as a disclaimer, I'm not saying everybody's like that. There are people that really are great-hearted and really like to give good, legitimate help and advice and encouragement to people. And they could do it under different banners, you know. They could, man. I mean, think of it this way. You got your each brand has their priests or, you know, bishops or whoever it is that would listen to a person, try to be there for them, try to give them advice, you know, try to help them along from a spiritual side is what I'm trying to say. Well, what happens if somebody doesn't really believe in those particular brands, right? But they still spiritually want to help somebody? Then that's when you can find people that are legitimately caring and really trying their best to listen and help people. And so I'm not saying that those people are off track. Those people can be great. But once again, I'm just saying that the greatest mistake that seekers can make is to overlook that they already have access to the CEO of the universe right where they are. And it's the trusting in middle management and externals, the ones that would lead them out into these side, lead them off course basically, and all kinds of sparkly and tales of amazement and hobbies and weird things. That all of that, even though it seems like it's amazing phenomena that you'd never seen or even expected could be in this world, it all has locationality to it. It all involves forsaking what you already have and going out there. And even the teaching of those things, it has its up, its down, its left, its right, its front and back. There's locationality to everything, all phenomena that present themselves to you, even if it's sparkly, misty, light shows or spaceships or anything like that. There's a moment when they're not there, then there's a moment when they're there, but they don't last. The spaceships will fly off, and you'll still be sitting there because the place where you sit is the place that's enduring. And all those other things are just ways to get distracted. So the source, the first cause, is your answer. It won't mislead you. My Tai Chi teacher in Las Vegas, one of them anyway, Master Alwyn Sit-Sun Leung, he's from Hong Kong. He taught essentially the same thing. He'd say, man, you will never cheat yourself, everything. And so to me what it means is everything else is unreal, impermanent, not lasting. It comes and it goes. And as Dr. Masters said, quote, you don't even need me, end quote. Go directly to the source within. And now I'm going to tell you that story about how some people kind of wish they hadn't shown up for a Sunday service. Man, Dr. Paul Leon Masters could make people squirm. So one day, Dr. Paul Leon Masters walked in, and on the front row were a couple of the local characters. This was Las Vegas, realize that. The characters that were spiritually advising people, but they were using methods that had been debunked. That's what I'm trying to say. And apparently, they didn't realize that Dr. Paul Leon Masters was real big on people avoiding not just them, but pretty much any spiritual middle management that wasn't going directly to the source, to the CEO of the universe. And so Dr. Masters, of course, he welcomed them and always tried to help everybody, whoever attended with his Sunday talks, because he's a good, kind-hearted guy. Well, the fake spiritual advisors were sitting there on the front row starting to feel the heat. Some of their clients were probably in the room, actually. They were on the front row, and the clients were probably behind them looking at the back of their advisors' heads as they sat there on the front row. They were just waiting to see if Dr. Masters would call out the exact kind of debunked methods that they were using to trick and to con people. And when he started, it was a crack up, because they were just sitting there like pigs in a sauna. I mean, no offense intended. Like pigs in a sauna, sweating and squirming all over the place. But you could tell they knew that he was right. And then Dr. Masters got to this one sentence that he often gives. He says, no truly spiritual person would ever present themselves as a blank, as a person that does that, end quote. Man, when the lecture was over, it was like somebody opened a barnyard door. They got out of there as fast as they could. So Dr. Masters, he was a good guy. He worked to guide people away from the debunked paths, the ones that were debunked and inadvisable methods. And he didn't hold back. And really, that might have been the best blessing that some of those folks could have received. But it really was pure entertainment to watch this, I call him this elk of a man, march back and forth across the stage and make lots of people squirm. They'd start out sitting there as if they're on some kind of a vacation. But as soon as Dr. Masters started talking about their favorite illusions, man, they'd want to run for the door. Because he was an absolute spiritual maverick. He died, I should tell you this, he died, I think it was January of 2016. But another thing about Dr. Paul Leon Masters is he had the best voice and the best laugh. For years, Dr. Paul Leon Masters was also known as the voice of meditation. He had the best voice ever for guided meditations. And the good thing is it was largely content-free. He wasn't trying to throw a bunch of unnecessary fluff in there or have you direct your thoughts into some imagined building or a workshop or a spaceship or some other random place out of the blue that had nothing to do with anything. His teaching was really great and super entertaining too. Of course, like I said, it didn't exactly match mine, but it was still valuable to listen to, especially the importance of going directly to the source and avoiding middle management. And that's being free. Sometimes Dr. Masters would make the dumbest faces. He'd stand there and quote these old-time commercials that only he was old enough to remember. And he'd mention them as if everybody in the room would have heard them before and know the memory. But and once he started laughing, man, like I said, forget it. We didn't call him Yonkers for nothing. He had that distinctive laugh that was just the greatest. So Sunday morning would roll around, me and my kids, we'd be all ready to go to church, and we'd say, let's all go see Yonkers today. We'd jump on the bus and head on out, man. But now, what was Dr. Paul Leon Masters' main teaching? This is what it seems like it was from my experience. His main teaching is that you are it. You already come fully equipped from the universal factory. And he'd say just like this, he'd say, you are it. You come fully equipped from the universal factory. You don't need me or anyone else. Tell all middle management to go to the blazes. You have the CEO of the universe. Don't listen to me or to anyone else. Go directly to the source, to the CEO of the universe. It was the perennial philosophy, that which wise men, sages, and seers down through the ages have known. Dr. Paul Leon Masters taught that we don't need to sit around and wait for somebody to pretend to communicate with some 5,000-year-old accountant. That even when that accountant was alive on Earth, no one on Earth would listen to him anyway. And now just because the accountant is dead and floating around and figures out some sparkly way to appear to somebody and communicate with them, whether he actually does or not, now his ideas are suddenly great? Yeah, I think not. In fairness to you, though, if you have an accountant that flies around and maybe yours is not 5,000 years old, but 6,000 or 4,000, just realize I'm not talking about your favorite person. So that's about the best of the teachings of Dr. Paul Leon Masters. And I look at it this way: just because something appears doesn't make it real. A stupid idea is a stupid idea, even if it comes with a lot of theater, appears all glittery, or comes and goes in a flash. It may be just more BS. There's this idea that if it can newly arrive, it can also newly depart, and that means that it isn't lasting, and therefore not the ultimate. Only you are steadily here. So what this means is the misguided spiritual show person is going to eventually jump on a plane and get smaller and smaller as they fly off with your money into the distance. And they'll become just a little dot on the horizon, and then they're gone. They'll be here one moment and gone the next, and they will fly off into the sunset. can you see that that isn't lasting? And that which isn't lasting is temporary, impermanent, and therefore not real. If something comes and goes in a flash, like in the blink of an eye, you might say, oh, it must not have been real. But even if that instant or that flash could be extended over a longer period of time, it still would be no more real than it was. If it was extended to the full length of an entire day's seminar, if it can end, it will. It will still end. And when it goes, a lot of people will still tend to think it was real, but it wasn't. It was just a temporary and fleeting flash that was extended over time. It still was newly obtained. It lasted for a while, and then it newly ended. It didn't last. So just like that cosmic accountant that died sitting on the toilet 5,000 years earlier and might now be floating around looking for toilet paper, looks down and he sees you, and you look the other way, he sees someone else. Sorry. But the fleeting appearance that came and went in a flash, this is the thing. That fleeting appearance did appear to somebody. It appeared to you. You were the one that was there before the flash. You were the one that was there during the flash. And you are the one that was there after the flash. You are even still here now, listening or watching this video. Therefore, you are it. You come fully equipped from the universal factory. Final thoughts. Dr. Paul Leon Masters. He founded both the University of Metaphysics and the University of Sedona. I like to think that it was a sense of mission and service to the lost that brought him to Las Vegas. I also think that part of what drew him to the Las Vegas of the time was that it was a pretty great and interesting place to live. Even though Dr. Masters' teachings didn't exactly match mine, I still give thanks for knowing him to this day. Dr. Paul Leon Masters was a spiritual maverick. And what better place than Las Vegas? There was nothing boring about living there in Las Vegas at that time. Eventually, though, Dr. Paul Leon Masters went to the Mecca of the people that really needed him, the people in Sedona. And would you please be so kind as to like and subscribe to my videos? I really appreciate it. If you're interested in learning this way of gathering 2 or more points and setting up the equivalent of an actual, like an old-fashioned scale, basically, using the human body as a tool, as a frame, to surf the changeless place between opposites. I have a video on that called How to Surf or Skateboard Without a Board. And that's the main one that I'm recommending at first to read, because it's a really amazing technique that I developed about 30 plus years ago, around 30 years ago. And yeah, it's a way to, I don't know how to say it, but it's really a cool video and a cool article. So look for that, if you will. Thanks again. And also I'm trying to come up with some decent looking merch. If you want to look it over, I'd appreciate it. I put the link to that down below. All right, thank you.